The Magellan Rig Fatal Radio Failure. October 9th, 2000. Just after midnight on the Magellan oil rig, workers were carrying out routine tasks below the main deck. 46 feet down, Gordon Moffat hung in a safety harness attached to a winch as he worked on fixing some equipment under the rig. Beside him was a banksman, the spotter responsible for watching Gordon the whole time. Gordon used hand signals: lift, stop, lower. The banksman had one task: send those signals by radio to the winch operator above. Up on the drill floor, the operator couldn't see Gordon. He relied entirely on those radio calls. Around 12:30 a.m., Gordon finished his task and signaled that he needed to be lifted a little. The banksman sent the command by radio, and the winch operator started raising him. Moments later, Gordon realized he was being pulled straight toward a narrow 10-inch hole in the steel floor above him, known as the mouse hole, used for drilling pipes. It was far too small for a person to pass through. As the hole approached, Gordon immediately signaled, "Stop." The banksman saw it. He grabbed the radio and called the stop command, but the radio failed. Nothing went through. Above, the winch operator heard no warning. He kept lifting. Gordon felt himself rising toward the hole. He twisted in the harness, trying to angle away from the opening, but the winch pulled with steady force. Workers below shouted, tried other radios, even grabbed the phone system, but none of it reached the operator in time. Within 10 to 15 seconds, Gordon was pulled into the steel opening. His body couldn't compress to 10 inches. The sharp steel edges began cutting through him. His skin tore. The 4 layers of abdominal muscle ripped apart. His abdominal cavity was breached, and internal organs started pushing through the gap as he was pulled tighter. The winch finally stopped, but it was too late. Investigators later found that a failed radio, no visual contact, and poor safety procedures all contributed to Gordon's death. One simple fix, a working backup radio, would have saved his life. The Fox Burge incident. On December 12, 2022, the Fox Burge oil rig was sitting in the dark waters of the Persian Gulf. The accommodation block housed workers in close quarters, including 38-year-old Robert Robson and his 43-year-old roommate, Scott Forrest. Reports indicate that the crew was suffering from severe sleep deprivation due to oversensitive alarms that kept triggering throughout the night. By this night, Forrest had allegedly been awake for nearly 72 hours. This prolonged sleeplessness triggered an acute psychotic episode involving persecution mania, where Forrest became convinced Robson intended to harm him. Around 4 a.m., Forrest woke in panic. His mind went straight into survival mode. He climbed down from his bunk as quietly as he could, staring at Robson, who was asleep and defenseless. In the corner of the cabin was a 22-pound iron weight used for rig operations. Forrest grabbed it, lifted it over his head, and brought it down on Robson. Forensic reconstruction suggests he struck Robson approximately 20 times while the victim lay in his bunk. The injuries were catastrophic, causing massive cranial trauma that resulted in immediate incapacitation and death. There was no evidence of a struggle. Robson never had the chance to defend himself. Forrest was detained shortly after. A Qatari court convicted him of manslaughter and sentenced him to 10 years in prison. Robson's partner, Christy Graham, publicly appealed the ruling, heartbroken that the sentence wasn't longer. The Byford Dolphin oil rig disaster. November 5, 1983. Around 4 in the morning, the Byford Dolphin oil rig in the North Sea was working as usual. Inside its chamber system, 4 deep-sea divers were living under high pressure, about 9 times more than normal air. They had to stay like that for weeks, so their bodies wouldn't be crushed while working deep underwater. 2 divers, Truls Hellevik and Bjorn Bergersen, had just returned from a deep dive in the diving bell, which docked directly to the trunk, and were moving through it into Chamber 1, where the resting divers Roy Lucas and Edwin Coward were waiting. Above them on the deck, dive tenders William Crammond and Martin Saunders operated the external mechanism that locked the diving bell to the chamber system. Unable to see inside and relying solely on procedure and communication, inside the trunk, Hellevik tried to close the inner chamber door, but it jammed and stayed open by a few inches. Believing all internal doors were shut and the trunk isolated, Crammond followed procedure on deck and released the clamp that held the pressurized system to the bell. In that split second, everything failed. Because the inner door was not sealed, 9 atmospheres of pressure had only one escape route, a narrow 23-inch gap. The trapped air blasted through that opening in less than a second, straight into Hellevick. The gap was smaller than his shoulders, and as his body was forced through, his torso tore open, his spine and ribs were ripped out, and his organs were thrown across the metal floor. Inside the chambers, Lucas, Coward, and Bergerson died instantly as the gas in their blood expanded in seconds and effectively boiled them from within. On the deck above, the 4-ton diving bell blew free and smashed into Crammond, killing him instantly, while Saunders survived with catastrophic injuries. Investigators later concluded it was not simple human error, but a fatal design flaw. The system lacked a safety interlock to stop the clamp from opening while still pressurized, and a basic mechanical safeguard could have saved all 5 men. The pipeline vacuum disaster. February 25, 2022. Off the coast of Trinidad, the 5 divers, Kazim Ali Jr., Yusuf Henry, Fizal Kurban, Rishi Nagasar, and Christopher Boudrum, were part of a maintenance crew hired to service a fuel pipeline between shore and offshore loading points. For a month, that pipeline had been sealed with an inflatable plug, so repairs could be done safely. Their task was simple: remove the plug and reopen the line. The plug sat inside a pressurized chamber, 60 feet underwater. What none of them knew was that behind the plug stretched a long, empty section of pipeline with extremely low pressure inside, essentially a giant vacuum. At 3 p.m., they removed the plug. A violent suction force, compared to opening a plane door mid-flight, instantly ripped all 5 men from the chamber and fired them into the dark, oil-slicked pipe. Rishi Nagasar landed in a small air pocket deep inside. In total darkness, he banged on the steel walls for hours as oxygen dropped and carbon dioxide rose, slowly slipping into unconsciousness. Kazim, Henry, and Kurban tried to move through water-filled sections. Kurban vanished in the darkness and drowned. Henry and Kazim found another air pocket and survived the night, hitting the pipe walls in hopes of rescue. But help never came. On land, families begged the oil company to send a rescue team, but officials argued about safety rules. Then, at 6 a.m., the company made a fatal decision. They removed a critical seal above the pipeline, expecting water to push the men out. Instead, 36 feet of water surged through. The air pockets collapsed instantly, drowning Kazim, Henry, Kurban, and Nagasar in water mixed with crude oil. Only one diver survived, Christopher Boudrum, who crawled back through the pipe despite severe injuries and crude oil in his lungs.